Hi, my name is Deon Rebello, and this is the Bullion Vault. Willem, how are you doing?
Good in you, Deon.
Very good. So this is episode 10. So we're really starting to get some nice momentum, and we're getting through some really interesting topics. And I think what we had discussed was we are getting feedback from some of the listeners asking questions about Bullion. And again, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the various things that we now take for granted, a lot of the lay people would not even understand some of these things. Yet, they sometimes the barriers to entry into this market because it's not understood so well.
Definitely. I mean, it's simple terminology for us, stuff we throw around lightly, stuff we used to, but it might just make somebody out there go, "What?" So yeah, I think it's a good idea to just sit down, discuss a few of these things, discuss a few things that we take for granted, but perhaps is not as common knowledge as we might think it is.
Exactly. So, we were going to also diversify and bring in some other topics, but we were guessing on the Formula One. It is starting and there's some interest, but our producer did say that we have to tie this to Bullion. I will
Yes,
have you
yes,
know
yes.
that. And I'm looking,
We have to,
I
yes.
am eyeballing her right now. So, it is important that let's just throw down some interesting things. It is pre F1, so we both are actually on the same page with this one.
Yeah, definitely.
Where are we going? Who's got the chance of taking on Verstappen this year?
Definitely Norris
Yes.
or McLaren in general. We'll have to see how Piastri evolves. Ferrari, I think they're going to be up there. Whether they're going to be right at the sharp edge, I'm not 100% sure, but we'll see. And then I've got big hopes for Sainz at Williams.
Interesting. So I think for me, definitely McLaren. As we had spoken pre-show, there's some interesting things there. I think when he was actually a real title contender, it was so into the season that McLaren were like, "Are we actually going to do this?" And they were not sure on which driver to was their number one driver and so on. Again, that's rookie mistakes. I think they'll go into the season a lot more confident. Preseason testing does say that they're looking very good and they're looking very sharp. Uh, of course, Ferrari with Hamilton, that's a big name in a very iconic team. I do always believe that those things, like we saw with Schumi, is they're very hard to just get off the starting blocks and start to produce unbelievable results. That said, Leclerc is in there and he has been there and he was very competitive last year. So I do believe he's got some give into to actually take a charge. I'll never ever forget the season when Braun, a complete white vehicle with Jensen Button, started at the season and they won and won and won and won. And before anyone could look, they won the championship. And there was not an inclination of them actually being of any competitor level yet at that point. Yet they took everyone by surprise. So we could have that also.
Yeah, definitely. I think we'll have to see how it unfolds. We'll only know once the lights go out in Australia.
Okay, so now I'm going to tie this into Bullion.
I was wondering.
So it's interesting. Of course, it's a high net worth sport. It is the premier global sport, so it does attract a lot of very high net worth individuals. And for me, again, people invest into that sport, and the kind of people that would listen to Formula One or watch it would be probably people that have available income that could look to actually buy into or negate some of the risks that we've spoken time and time again about the economic uncertainty and so on. So I've kind of joined that. I quite like that. But into the questions.
Yes.
So as a layperson, we always talk about when we quote gold, we always firstly quote it in dollars. And the reason we mainly do that is because the dollar still, regardless, is the international currency, but we can always quote it in any currency. But we always quote it as ounces, and more specifically, troy ounces.
Yes, and the reason why we're using troy ounces, which is 31.10347768 grams, It's a very odd number. I'll get to that in a second. But the reason why we quote it in troy ounces is it comes from the medieval times, really, in the city of Troyes in France. And I probably butchered that name, but anyway, so it was a economic hub, basically a trading hub in the Middle Ages, and they were doing lots of trade with Britain, a lot of trade with the rest of Europe, and they defined an ounce. They needed a measurement of weight, and they defined this ounce as 480 grains of barley. Now, I don't know how accurate that is, but that was the weight then, and hence that became an ounce, and therefore now Troyes is spelled Troyes, and there you can see the connection to Troy. And the story actually, some historians say, goes back further than that, goes back to ancient Roman times, where the Romans were using copper bars as currency, and this copper bar could be divided into 12 pieces, each piece weighing 31.1 grams roughly, and these were called uncia, or ounce. And so it was picked up from there. It was adapted into England because I think it was Charles or George II was actually French, so he adapted that, and then later it was adopted by America, and it became the world standard, and therefore we have this 31.10, etc., etc., troy ounce.
Okay, and that's great. I mean, because we use these terms. So when we discussing an ounce, of course, we live in a country that's metric. So we refer generally to everything in grams and kilograms and so on. So we always do derive it back. Interesting enough, when you manufacture, we would round it up. So for instance, most of our medallions that we quote as ounces are not the 31.013476 grams. We round it up to 31.2 because, again, by law, we need to make sure that we are within the parameters of a classified ounce. Anything below that would then still cause legal consequences or ramifications.
Yeah, rather over than
Under.
under. It's as simple as that. And yes, the other weird thing is it's also different from a standard ounce, which is 28.34 grams or something like that, I think. So it's it's the best description I've heard of some of these measurement systems is it's a bunch of drunk mathematicians playing dice. But so yeah, there we have it. Basically, the troy ounce, which is 31.1034 grams. We've got the standard ounce, which is 21.34, 28.34, I think, and that's used for stuff like sugar, grain, or anything like that.
Okay, so if we go back into bullion, and we that's specifically what we talk about on this podcast, is we generally know that, for instance, the medallions we manufacture, and a lot of medallions that we quote in ounces are generally 24 karat, which we do. But a lot of other companies would also do that. It's generally from an investing perspective, people want to make sure that they're getting an ounce of gold. Now we look at the iconic and the first true coin that was since 1976 came into circulation as an investment tool. It is a sovereign coin. It has a legal tender status and all those things. And of course, it's our Kruger Rand, which is as iconic as pretty much Biltong and the Springboks.
Definitely. And yes, the Kruger Rand was the first real bullion coin available to the public. And that sparked things like the Canadian maple. It sparked things like the American eagle. Everybody saw suddenly, oh wow, there's a demand for bullion coins, and everybody started making their own version of that. Canada, America, Australia, everybody has their own version now, but there's only one, the original, the OG, the Kruger Rand. And the interesting thing about the Kruger Rand is, you said earlier we were talking about gold, fine gold, 24 karat 999 fine gold, which is what our medallions are made of. The Kruger Rand is actually 22 karat gold. It's actually 916 gold, not 999 gold. And the reason for that is they add copper to the gold in order to make it harder, more durable. And that's also which gives the Krugerrand, its iconic rose gold tint.
And that's quite interesting, and it's important for people to know that. But even though the Krugerrand has copper, it still has a full ounce of gold in it, correct?
Yes, that's 100% correct. As if you look at an ounce of 24 karat gold, that would be 31.10, etc. grams. If you look at the Krugerrand actually weighs 33.93 grams. So it's heavier than a normal ounce because there is actually an ounce of 24 karat gold contained in that Krugerrand. The copper is just extra. It doesn't take up any of the weight of the gold. It's just extra, and that's why it's a heavier coin than the normal ounce.
And the main reasoning behind that is quite practical.
It's just durability. Copper is harder. 24 karat gold is really soft.
Yeah.
You can bite into it and dent it. You can bend it with your hand. It's soft, and the copper just gives it that extra stability, that extra rigidity, and the extra durability.
So also, if you look at then a Krugerrand, the other thing that we also just need to highlight is that it's a sovereign coin. As I mentioned, it is legal tender. It complies to a whole range of laws that you cannot deface it, you cannot melt it, and so on. And that also opened the market for medallions. Medallions is a finished item of gold, which the laws pertain. You can't hold any unfinished, you can't hold grains or dust or so on. It needs to be finished item that can then be sold.
Yeah, definitely. It's as you said, you can't hold gold dust. It needs to be in the form of a medallion or perhaps a ring, a necklace, something like that. It needs to be a finished, produced item. You cannot have raw gold as a layman or without a beneficiation license.
Okay, so if we're going to go into that, and now you're opening up a whole different side of this, is we also get questions, and we've had clients that we do also do resales for clients. We do buybacks, and a lot of the time, and we've been confronted where clients want to sell jewelry, and they've got this necklace and they paid a fortune for it, and it's got 18 karat or 9 karat gold or 22 karat gold. What's the difference there?
Okay, so let's start with the price of gold. Now, there's this thing called the spot price.
Yeah.
And the spot price basically states that this is the price that the market determines this commodity is worth at this point in time. So let's say the spot price is $2,925 for an ounce of gold. That's what the market says it's worth if you factor in all of the different things that determines the price of gold. That's what the market says it's worth. However, if you look at a website, for instance, goldsilver.com or something like that, you might see three numbers there. You would see the ask, the mid, and the bid. So the bid is what the market players are willing to pay for that ounce of gold. So they might be willing to pay 2,900. And the ask is what those market players are willing to sell that gold for. So that might be $2,950. And then, somewhere in the middle, you get the spot price or the market price for that gold. So if we take that, then we need to look at what defines the value of an item. Let's say a ring or a medallion or anything for that matter. There are two main things that determine the value, and that is the weight and the purity. So you could have 18 karat gold, you could have 22 karat gold, or you can have 24 karat gold. And basically what it comes down to is how much pure gold is in that item. And if you're selling it to, you go into a shop, you see these kiosks that'll buy your gold.
Divorce your gold, we'll buy your gold.
Exactly, those guys, yes. And here's the thing, you might have a ring that was lovingly crafted by a master craftsman that is beautiful, that's been in your family for 10 generations. You're going to take that to them. They're going to put it on a scale. They're going to say, all right, so this is 18 karat gold and it weighs this. Therefore, this is the price minus whatever our take is. That's what we pay you for it. And that is the true value of gold. It is the base price, the purity, the weight, how much actual pure gold is in that item.
So just on that then, and again, taking it back to coins. So I have a coin. Why is the coin then more expensive than the spot price?
Interesting question. And here's the thing, casual investors, now I'm talking about people who buy an ounce of gold or 2 ounces of gold, or heck, even a kilogram of gold. There's different levels of casual, obviously. So casual investors will probably never pay spot for gold. And the main reason behind that is that spot gold is the price of just the pure gold. However, you can't own that, as we just discussed. You can't own that gold dust. You can't own those gold granules. It needs to be produced into an item, a finished item. And that's why, if you take a coin, for instance, there's going to be a premium on firstly transporting that gold from the refinery to the mint. The mint needs to then use labor and skill and effort to produce a coin. That coin then goes to a retailer like ourselves, and we need to make a living as well. So there's a premium applied to that, and at the end of the day, that's what you end up buying. And that is why you probably will never in your life, unless you get an absolutely brilliant deal, pay spot for gold.
So what's interesting there, and I also think what's important here is generally that price is also the paper derivative. It's what the market will dictate, and generally that's done by either the LBMA, which is the London Bullion Market Association, or the contract sides, which is from the US side, which is the COMEX. And they are generally the two that would then price the actual gold in its relation to the dollar and to its supply and demand and so on. There's a whole number of things that qualifies the pricing on a specific day. Again, the price is dynamic. So as we're talking, it's incrementally either moving up or down right now.
Yes, it's constantly it's liquid. It's constantly moving, constantly flowing. Um, Anything can happen. It can send the price shooting up. It can send the price spiraling down, and that's the nature of any commodity, really. Whether we're talking coal, oil, natural gas, gold, any commodity, the price is in flux constantly, and it all comes down to supply and demand, what people are willing to pay for it.
So a question, if I've got jewelry, is there value to that?
Definitely, of course, there's a value to that, especially well, it depends what kind of jewelry you have. If you've got plated tin, then I don't know, you might get $5 at the garage sale for it. If you've got actual 22 or 18 karat gold jewelry, then yes, definitely there's value to it. There's gold in that, and depending on how much gold is in that necklace, in that ring, in that tiara, um, you will be able to get the value of that gold at the very least. If you have a collector who's interested and likes the look of it, he might be willing to pay more. Same thing with something like a Krugerrand. There's different dates on the Krugerrand. Now, we know from our perspective, it's a Krugerrand, it's 1 ounce of gold. That's the gold price. That's what we pay for it. However, there might be a date on a Krugerrand, and if you've got a bit of a sly salesman, he might tell you, oh, but that's rare. A collector will pay extra for that. So if you pay 2,000 extra for it now, in 10 years, you're going to get 10,000 extra for that date. And let's be honest, the only date on Krugerrands that are meaningful are the ones that are meaningful to you. And don't expect that to be meaningful to anybody else.
And again, I was going to highlight that it's a sentimental value. So if for instance, I've got children and I want to make sure that each of them, when they turn 21, get a Krugerrand for their birthday based from their birth date. That's my own reason for that. There would then be a premium applied to any astute salesman. There's an opportunity to leverage a better price out of it.
Definitely, if you walk into any place saying, I want a 1981 Krugerrand, he's going to know there's a reason why you want that specific date, and you are willing to pay extra to get it. It's as simple as that.
Okay, now the next thing, proof coins. Now we know this, and I remember I did a sale with a client based in George, and he then proceeded to say to me, and we had sold him half-ounce medallions, and he proceeded to show me his brand new proof Krugerrand coins that were still in capsules, that were amazing. And I said to him, so how much did you pay for them? And it turned out, I mean, regardless of that price in the day, he paid literally what he would have bought an ounce of gold for. In other words, it was literally 100% of the price he paid on top of that.
And the sad thing is, it's still 1 ounce of gold.
And
Krugerrand medallion proof, it's still 1 ounce of gold. But once again, we've got shrewd salesmen saying, but this is a proof, it's going to be worth more. It's 1 ounce of gold.
And let's make that very clear, is a proof coin to a regular circulation Krugerrand to a medallion, to an old rusty medallion that's in a drawer for 10, 15 years. Regardless of it being nice and shiny or scratchy, the real value is in how much gold is in there in weight, ultimately.
Weight and purity, we're back to those two. By the way, if it's rusty, it's not gold.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of went to scratch but I'm building up the image of a dirty old coin.
No, definitely. It doesn't matter. It comes down to weight and purity, and any fair buyer will give you that money for it. And that's the thing that people need to look out for, is somebody telling you, oh, but this is old, so what? Oh, but this is tarnished, so what? Silver can tarnish. Doesn't matter. It's still 1 ounce of silver. It's still 1 ounce of gold, and that will never change.
And that's important. And again, I challenge any of our contemporaries who would try to sell a sovereign coin at a higher premium of 50 to 100% to the margins that we would sell a medallion, to prove it any different. Like Willem says, unless it's a special year that there was an error, and we've talked about this in general numismatics, where there's, I think it's an American dollar coin where the D was turned upside down or something, that creates a mistake when they were minting it. And suddenly, because there are not a lot of those left in circulation, they become highly sought after because of those errors.
That's true, but now we're moving into numismatics and away from investing in gold as a commodity.
Correct.
Yes, there is value in investing in numismatics, but here's the thing. In order to sell that coin, yes, they will tell you it's worth this, but in order to sell it, you need to find another collector who wants to buy it. Gold is different. Anybody will buy gold. It's a very liquid asset. And yeah, you might get a lot more money from something like numismatics if you have a very sought after coin, but still it's not as liquid as just gold. And at any point in time, I don't know, maybe somebody discovers a whole box of those coins that were buried somewhere, and suddenly it went from being 10 of them in the world to 10,000, and now it's worth nothing.
And again, I really highlight that because of how sometimes bullion is marketed, that it's a very special thing, and it deserves these massive premiums. Again, the bottom line is you want to make sure that you're purchasing good bullion at good prices, and make sure they're competitive. Always ask the question, whoever you're buying from, to make sure that they are giving you the best possible price. There will be a premium from spot, as Willem's alluded to, and there's no running away from that.
No, definitely. And depending on what coin you buy, yes, some of them are more desirable than others. You might really want to have a Canadian maple leaf or one of the Aussie kangaroos or something like that. And you will see a flux in price between them, but usually it's not that much. Something like the proof Krugerrand, on the other hand, gets massive premiums applied to it because it's a proof Krugerrand. it's something special. At the end of the day, if you're doing this to invest in bullion as a commodity, it doesn't matter. All you need is 1 ounce of gold.
100%. And I think that for the idea of proof coins and normal coins, it is clear that don't allow. And I remember there's a specific company that sold a lot of coins based on the rarity of them. And again, these modern coins are not rare. And they're leveraging off historical moments, and they tie it together with the story and voting ballads and so on, and you buy that image. But ultimately, the person buying it is buying it for that investment thinking that in 5-10 years this is going to be worth so much more. And then they're shocked to find out that when they do want to sell it, that they will just literally get the price of the metals, be it there's an ounce of gold or silver or platinum on it. That's all that matters. The other stuff is historical and it's very nice, but again, it's to the eye of the seller and the buyer, their interest on the historical facts. In fact, I mean, and it was a client we had who had uh, a pound of gold. It was done in a medallion of Mandela and de Klerk, and it was that whole historical thing of South Africa in the 1994 elections. And he chose to sell it because he was very desperate to sell it. It's a historical thing, and ultimately the person that we had sold it to went and melted it, put it in a container and melted it down. So the historical fact, and as sad as this is, it had nothing to do with the real value of the gold.
That's true. And I mean, numismatics is something outside of our realm of expertise. We don't deal in numismatics. We don't buy numismatic coins. Um, yes, there's a market for it, but as I said, if you want to preserve that history, and if you want to get that extra value from the history that you've paid for, you're going to have to sell it to another collector, or else it's going to end up being melted down to make something else.
And that's the harsh reality. So next question. We've spoken about it in one of the other podcasts where we spoke about the Kindleberger and Minsky model of booms and busts. Now, Willem, let's unpack this. What does that really mean, and what does it really apply to?
So let's start off with what is the Kindleberger Minsky model. So these are two guys, two economists, very celebrated economists, and they came up with a model of basically any commodity, anything that enters the mass market. I think for this particular instance, let's use Bitcoin because it's a relatively recent, in the grander scheme of things, addition to the market. And now the model they've created consists of 4 stages. You've got your stealth phase, what they call it. Then you've got your awareness phase. Then you've got your mania phase. And finally, you've got your bust. So what happens is, if we look at the first phase, now this is the stealth phase. This is like the days when you could buy a Bitcoin for 1 cent.
Now, we're going to use the story of Bitcoin. I remember first hearing about Bitcoin, and I could have at that time bought it. I think it was something ridiculous, like $5 a Bitcoin.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, I read an article where I think it was in 2017, around about there, somebody tried to sell 10,000 Bitcoin for $50. No takers. Nobody wanted it. And that's the stealth phase. So now you've got these people who are sitting there looking at this going, I've heard of this. There's some guy that has come up with this stuff. He says it's going to be absolutely huge. Right now, it's absolutely worthless. I can't do anything with it. I can't even buy anything with it. It's supposed to be a currency. But you know what? I've got $50 burning a hole in my pocket. So he buys $50 worth of Bitcoin at $5 a Bitcoin, or whatever the case might be. So that's the stealth phase. And the people who just buy it, I don't know, on a whim, maybe they see the potential, maybe they truly believe, maybe they just want something odd.
And these are the kind of people that invest in that stealth phase when it's basically worth nothing, but it's there.
And also be very clear here is in that stealth phase, it's the early adopters. So it's like you say, it's probably people that understand that commodity or that share probably a little bit better than the average person in the street, and they're aware that there's massive potential. So some of them make a calculated risk, and as you say, go and spend $50 or $1,000 on that price. Others would be punting it where they think, you know what, I've got that. Why not just buy it and let's wait and see?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I did a bit of a calculation earlier. That 10,000 Bitcoins that he tried to sell for $50 that nobody wanted to buy, yesterday would have been worth 1.5 billion rand. Billion with a B. So that's the thing. And so anyway, we've now covered the stealth phase. And as you said, that's your early adopters. That's the guy who says, I'm going to take a chance on this. It's not that much money. Why not? So after the stealth phase comes the awareness phase. And this is when it starts picking up. So now that 50 or that 10,000 Bitcoin that nobody could do anything with, it was just there. You couldn't buy anything with it. Somebody went and bought 2 pizzas with 10,000 Bitcoin. There's value suddenly. You can buy stuff with it. And now all your institutional investors, your BlackRock, your JP Morgan, all of those guys start looking at this and saying, oh, but we need to get in on that. So your institutional investors start buying into this product, into this commodity, and through them, the general public starts hearing about it. And the value starts picking up. It starts picking up slowly, slowly, slowly. And that brings us to the next phase, which is the mania phase.
So just to catch you up here, so from a graph perspective, that the graph will start like that, and then it drops down. So that's the institutional investors, but the stealth phase, it's down. Institutional investors actually drops a little bit, and now it starts to curve up with that interest. And again, that interest comes from a story like that, where someone went and bought 2 pizzas for how many Bitcoin?
10,000.
And again, that creates interest. We've seen it with silver, where suddenly there's within social media, the Reddit Wall Street bets groups, and suddenly they were trying to squeeze the price of silver and they shot it up. But suddenly there's an interest, and what happens there is the prices then start to drop that curve and start to go parabolic.
So now we hit the mania phase, and that's when your general public get in on the act. Everybody wants a piece of the action because they heard the story about the guy who just made $3 million from Bitcoin. And now Bitcoin is sitting at $3,000 because all the institutional investors have already invested in that. There's already interest, there's already value, and everybody is piling in. Everybody is doing their best to get as much of their hands on it, as much of it as possible. And that's when the price starts skyrocketing. And that's when we see $20,000 a Bitcoin.
So that's that parabolic phase now that we're talking about, that the prices are shooting up. You're getting people that are literally remortgaging their homes to now go and buy Bitcoin. Mania is quite interesting because it tells me that there's not a lot of thought and lots of emotion involved in these kind of purchases.
It's you're never going to hear the story about the guy who lost his house because he invested in Bitcoin. You're going to hear the story about the guy who's bought a mansion because he's invested in Bitcoin. The guy who now drives a Lamborghini because he invested in Bitcoin. You're not going to hear the story of the guy who had to sell his VW Golf and is now driving a cardboard box because of Bitcoin. But that happens, and that's because of the bust phase. Because now you've got all of this interest, all of this hype, all of this mania inflating the value of this commodity up to the point where it becomes unsustainable. And then something's got to give. And the first thing is there's this market correction. The price drops off. And people get scared. And they start selling. And then the market sort of stabilizes and the people go, okay, no, it's fine. But we're scared. We don't trust it anymore. Look, it was worth 20,000 yesterday. It's worth 18,000 today. I've already lost $2,000 in value. Sell it and boom, $3,000 a Bitcoin. And we saw those exact numbers happen.
And again, there's a macro and a micro view of the Kindleberger and Minsky model to consider here. You're going to have phases in the markets. You're going to have these uptakes in, say, a decision, like when Trump became president. The price of the dollar strengthened overnight, or I think it actually dropped, if I remember. But there was a strengthening in gold.
Yes.
And the fact is, the markets then start to show either a favor or a non-favor to certain things. War, perfect example, has a big effect on the market. Within Bitcoin, there were a lot of scams where get rich, and invest in this, and it was all based on people knowing very little about Bitcoin, but almost wanting to buy into it with no homework and a lot of ignorance into what they were actually buying into.
Definitely, and that's the problem with, I think, any commodity really is people see the profit to be had. Something like gold, the price has shot up over the last year. Somebody who's not familiar with gold or who doesn't really know gold might go and take out another R1 million on his house, pin everything on gold, and it might not work out for him. And that's the same thing is going into or buying into a commodity. Firstly, do your due diligence, do your homework, and make sure you know what you're buying into. Secondly, don't pin everything you have on a single commodity or a single product, because there are people out there who want your money and they will tell you any story they need to get it.
Again, I think this is very important. You're now talking about diversification. And for me, that's always been a very big part of what we talk about. Is we passionate about bullion. In fact, if I could get everyone to be buying bullion, I'd be happy beyond any measure I can even qualify or quantify. That said, there's also responsibility. There's also responsibility to say, do your homework, do your due diligence, make sure you know who you're dealing with, make sure you understand if they're a legitimate business, and that all those kind of things. Again, this is also what comes into it. If you look at anyone that goes and puts everything on something, it's betting. You are almost waiting for an opportunity. And generally, those are 50-50s. It's like you might as well go to roulette and play black and red. And that's the same probabilities you'd have.
Definitely, and here's the thing: there's no guarantee everything is just going to go up all the time.
No,
I mean,
exactly.
we saw that with Bitcoin, and the interesting thing I saw yesterday is it's doing a similar sort of movement, following that Kindle Minsky model again. This time just at a higher price point. But if you look at the two, I'll see if I can find the actual graphs and just do a bit of an overlay. You'll see it's doing the exact same thing again. It shot up in that mania phase, and it's very likely we're going to see another bust on it. I think the point I'm trying to make is commodities go up, commodities go down, and if we look at that, there's a few terms that we throw out there, and we usually talk about the bears and the bulls. And another one is fiat currency. So let's start off with what is a fiat currency.
So if we look at it, and I mean, we've spoken about this before also, a fiat currency is the currency that is in circulation from a specific country. And so, for instance, our South African rand is a fiat currency. The US dollar is a fiat currency. The British pound, the yuan, the yen, they're all fiat currencies.
Yeah, so it's basically a unit or a unit of money that is sanctioned by the government, printed and manufactured by the government, and is being used as that country's main form of currency.
Yeah, and I think that's very important. Is again, currencies have a finite lifespan. And generally, we say that they have about a 27-year lifespan before they morphed into a new form of currency, or they developed further. A big thing with currencies, and this is what we experience, is they're not all the same. So what you pay for a dollar, $1 in rands is 18 rand. It used to be the rand was stronger, and again, those are all because each country is independent, and different things will dictate how that fiat currency will strengthen or weaken in relation to other currencies or commodities.
And that's the big thing about fiat currencies, and why we always encouraged people to at least have some of the investment in, not in the fiat currency of the country they live in. Like, for instance, we always say, get your wealth out of rands, get it into a non-fiat based investment like gold. You need something that's geo neutral, because the big danger is that fiat currencies lose value, and they can lose value overnight. Currency devaluation, something happens in the country like a sovereign default, a coup, anything like that, and suddenly your money is worth nothing. That million rand you had in the bank is worth $5.
And going further on that, it's also economic recessions and depressions. And so even, a lot of the examples you're raising there being coups or those kind of economic things are generally your developing countries or third world countries. But a lot of the first world countries seem to believe they immune to these things. They're not.
No, they're definitely not. Definitely not. I mean, we saw America almost go into a sovereign default. America, the almighty American dollar, almost went into a sovereign default. No country is immune.
And again, if we do the scenario also, is you look at the history of the US dollar, which is in inception since 1913. What $100 bought you then to what it buys you now is chalk and cheese. We know, and that's that currency devaluation you're talking about. And that's across the board with all fiat currencies. Again, we look at the same story with gold. The value of gold from those periods to where it is now, it's grown upward. Whereas all fiat currencies grow downward in what they're actually purchasing, their purchasing power.
Definitely, it's a decline in purchasing power. It's a decline in the actual value of the currency. Gold, on the other hand, has only continued to grow throughout the ages. And that's the difference. You earlier said 27 years average lifespan of a fiat currency. Gold has been used as currency for 3,000 years or more.
And let's be very honest, from Reserve Bank perspective, gold is money.
So yeah, definitely, the Reserves Bank very much do see gold as money. If you look at China buying gold at the moment, US doing a evaluation of their gold reserves at the moment, every reserve bank in the world just about buying up gold, and it gives them something to tie the value of their money to. It gives us something to fall back on, something more than paper and numbers on a spreadsheet, to actually represent the wealth of their nation.
So on that specific thing, again, it's the story of gold that we talk about all the time. That gold is money. Gold negates these uncertainties in these times that are very uncertain right now. And again, that's a very clear line. I always say, pay attention to what the big guys are doing, because generally we, as the man in the street, should be doing something similar, not on that scale, but in relative scale of economy.
Yeah, definitely. And it's important to keep an eye on the markets. And which brings us to the next thing. We talk about the markets, and you often hear us talk about the bulls and the bears. So what is a bull? What is a bear? It's quite simple, really. A bull is when a commodity or something, a stock or something, has an upwards trajectory, while a bear is when that same stock or commodity has a downwards trajectory. The easy thing to remember is, think of the two animals, think of how they would attack. A bull swipes up with its horns, a bear swipes down with its claw. So there you've got the bull, upwards trajectory, you've got the bear, downwards trajectory.
I love that analogy, and it's something that I've never really considered. But you say that, and I mean, we talk about it all the time. We talk about that we're in a bullish commodity cycle right now. So yes, everything is dipping upwards. And again, we always like to talk about those things. And you look at tech stocks, you look at all these things, and everyone talks about bullish markets and bear markets. And that's also something that people need to consider, the cycle of things. And again, that does play into the Minsky model of booms and busts, and those both tie into each other.
It definitely does. And the thing is, things aren't always as complicated as they might sound. Sometimes you just need a little bit of an explanation.
So, Willem, in conclusion, I think, we've covered quite a vast amount of different topics. And again, we thank the listener for supporting us. What do they need to do if they'd like to continue following us?
If you found the information useful, hit the like button. If you want to see some more, be sure to hit subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next video.
Thanks a lot and take care. Cheers.